Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the July 1st, 2025 meeting of the Litchfield Planning Board. Would you all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Start with the roll call of members. Michael Croto, Chair.
Gerald O'Connell, Vice Chair.
Jesse No, alternate.
Russell Blanchett, member.
Travis Tucker, member.
Jeremy Robitaille, Secretary.
Okay. Missing this evening, I believe, is Letha Riley and Steve Gannon, our ex officio member. So we are missing a full board member. So Jesse, if you're interested to becoming an alternate tonight to vote in Letha's place.
Yes, I do.
Okay, so we'll make you an alternate voting member. All right, first item, public input on non-agenda items. Items not on the agenda for this evening. Is there any public input on non-agenda items this evening? Okay. Seeing none, I will close public input on non-agenda items. We'll go to the first order of business this evening. Is number one, update on New Hampshire legislative bills for the 2025 session. I believe Jay gave us a handout this evening.
I am giving you a hand.
Oh, you are giving a handout, okay.
Thank you. Needless to say, these are not all the bills. These are the ones I thought that may be of interest.
Okay.
And, caveat, and you'll see as we go along, basically what you're looking at is kind of a spreadsheet. You've got the bill number in terms of the columns, title, etc. But if you go all the way over to the right, you can see where it says enrolled and governor's action. So most of these, as of the time that this was printed, it's a moving target. Have not yet been signed by the governor. So I'll just kind of note that, as we go along, there's always a chance that some of the bills that have not been signed could be vetoed. In some cases, I think that's pretty unlikely. So we're going to kind of roll through them. Most of these, well, I should say, some of these are bills that I kind of thought might be of interest. Some are ones where we may have to take some sort of action. Either zoning or regulatory action. So again, I kind of note that as I go along. There were a lot of bills in this legislative session. I'm not going to promise that there isn't something that might be of interest that is not on this list, but with all of those multiple caveats, I will dive into the first one, which is this is HB 92, and this has been signed. And to the extent that it's relevant, I don't think it affects anybody currently sitting, but you can no longer sit on both the planning board and the zoning board. Previously that had been true in some of the communities I work in. It is true. Not to say that I could or should editorialize, but it can be challenging when a case has been before both boards. That person always winds up either having to accuse themselves or walk a very careful line. So can't do that anymore. The next bill, HB 457, is kind of interesting the way it reads. What it reads is that you can't adopt or enforce any zoning ordinance or restriction that limits the number of occupants to fewer than 2 occupants per bedroom. What this essentially is saying that you can't prohibit halfway houses, group housing, transitional housing, similar types of housing. Communities have used different ways to do this. So in essence, if there is a group or an organization that wants to create a group home of some sort, they have a 4-bedroom house, they could certainly house at least 8 people in that house. You can't restrict them from doing so further. So it's kind of interesting the way it was worded. There were others related to transitional housing that did not make it. The next one I did put in here, but it really does not impact Litchfield. This is HB 631. This has been passed by both houses. It has not yet been enrolled, but this does allow multifamily or mixed-use development by right in any commercial district in certain urban municipalities, meaning you have water and sewer. We don't have water and sewer, so it would not impact Litchfield. Next one, HB 658. This one, I believe, has passed and, although it has not yet been enrolled. So this essentially requires that multifamily housing, or I should say, I'm sorry, manufactured housing must be allowed in all residential zones in every municipality in the state. So essentially, wherever we allow, anywhere in the residential zone, we have to allow manufactured housing. That will mean a change to the zoning ordinance as it now is. Right now in Litchfield, you can have manufactured housing in a manufactured housing overlay that is designated by the planning board in either a manufactured housing subdivision or park. We certainly could keep manufactured housing park as its own thing, but we would essentially have to allow them on any lot anywhere in town. So yeah, that'll be a zoning change. Again, assuming it actually gets signed into law. I'm hearing that it probably will. There's a push to get the governor to veto. We'll see. Next one I left in. It relates to, I don't believe we have any Class 6 roads in Litchfield, but it does relate to requirements for allowing a building to be constructed. I don't believe we have a single one.
I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't think so either. I left it in there, but I don't think so. This next one is not planning or zoning. It is building. But what this does is, this has been a big issue in a lot of planning circles. It allows essentially single-stair buildings. So just to read it, residential buildings between 4 and 6 floors are allowed to have only one stairwell under certain conditions. Currently, they're typically required to have 2. One stairwell reduces the cost of construction. So that's been a big push. That passed. The Senate concurred with the House amendment. It has not yet been enrolled. So again, that doesn't really directly affect the planning board. It does affect the cost of housing construction. It will affect building. And next, this is the one that is, so there's 2 bills here which are kind of interesting. The first one was SB 284, which related to parking for multifamily housing. It had certain exceptions in it. It was amended and changed, and it is the House bill version that, with amendments, that was passed. So essentially, this is what we were waiting for. It prohibits municipalities from requiring more than 1 parking space per residential unit, period. And again, not yet enrolled. Yes, that's right. So the next one is kind of odd. This actually came out of a project we were working on with the town of Brookline. We were working on an impact fee ordinance update for Brookline, and Brookline wanted to charge impact fees for a new public works building that they were building. And the opinion of their town attorney was the statute does not specifically say public works facilities. Therefore, in their very strict interpretation, you can't charge impact fees for public works. I thought that was a very narrow reading of the statute, but they went and got the legislation changed. So now you can. Next, again, so this may have, I have to look at this more closely because as I was reading it, I wasn't quite sure what they were trying to get at. But this allows an alternative way or condition that you can allow buildings along private roads. And so right now, building on an individual lot has to be on a Class 5 road. Or it's under a condominium form of ownership, and there's a private road. So this may provide a different way of building on private roads. Again, I need to dive into that a little bit more deeply. So flipping the page, this is the, I mentioned the Senate bill previously. It's HB 382's language that was ultimately adopted. They basically put those two bills together in an amendment, so we've already spoken on that. The next one is really informational, House Bill 399. This has been signed, and what this was do is establish a commission to study New Hampshire's Zoning Enabling Act. So in essence, I think that you're going to see a commission, created, and the idea is to really review comprehensively that piece of enabling legislation, which hasn't been reviewed comprehensively in a very long time. So that's been signed, more to come on that. The bill, of course, lays out who gets to be on it, and there'll be representatives, Mr. Municipal representatives, kind of et cetera, et cetera. So that'll be a very interesting one to watch, and I expect there'll be a lot of eyes on it, especially New Hampshire Municipal Association, I'm sure, New Hampshire Planners Association, some of the groups that I have to imagine will be looking at this very closely. Next does impact our subdivision and site plan regulations. Again, not yet enrolled, but passed both houses. What this would do, so right now we have something that's known as the 5-year exemption. So essentially, if you make active and substantial, completion, active and substantial progress on a subdivision or site plan within the first 24 months, you have a 5-year exemption from changes to planning and zoning requirements. So you don't have to meet something that comes in after the fact. Essentially, there's some life and safety exceptions to that. So what this does is it increases the time period for substantial completion from 2 years to 3, and it increases the 5-year exemption to 7. So in essence, it gives people more time, more protection. So again, assuming that's signed into law, we will have to address that in our regulations. So next is relative to the definition of ADUs. And so this bill does a couple of things. It, first of all, requires that all municipalities must allow either attached or detached ADUs by right. Currently, Litchfield does allow attached by right, so we meet that requirement. And it changes square footage requirements to a municipality cannot require the ADUs have less than 750 square feet. It defines an ADU as being up to 950 square feet, but a municipality can allow more if it wishes to. Really, at most, a modest amendment to our existing requirements. We allow up to 800. Amending that up to 950 would not be problematic. It doesn't require you to do that, though. It doesn't say you must allow at least 950. You have to allow at least 750. Strangely, the way our ordinance is worded is you can't have less than 500. That is something that we might want to look at. But I don't think there's an immediate impact to us. Litchfield's been pretty generous. The next one, I just throw in that, this is a bill that would update the state building code to include some more recent versions. And the next bill that runs alongside it is municipalities are prohibited from making any changes to the state building codes. So previously we couldn't be more or less stringent. Now you just can't make any changes to the state building code. So that's that. That makes it easier. There's a couple of other changes here, though, that are also really interesting. It impacts the appeals process, so it clarifies where you can appeal the state building code. And for the first time, I believe, it now allows for an appeal to Superior Court. So you might know better than I, but prior to this, there was no appeal. I always thought that was odd, that there was simply no way to appeal a ruling of either the board or the fire marshal. So now there is. You can go to Superior Court. So, very interesting. A couple of other changes in there as well. So that's really what I have gleaned. I think most of what's on this list is probably going to either pass into law without the governor's signature or be signed. So it seems pretty likely. So that's where we are. Again, of these, there's only a couple that are really gonna require zoning action, and a couple more that will require subdivision and site plan regulation changes for us. Some of the real biggies that were being contemplated didn't survive, which is probably not surprising. Things that are some of these are already controversial, but some of the stuff that was really, really controversial didn't make it. That's what I've got.
Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting session. And obviously, that's a shorthand version in some of these bills. If you read the actual bill, there's more going on. And for some of them that we decide that we're gonna really want to work on, we'll pull those. Like, for instance, manufactured housing, there were some slight changes to those definitions. For those who are interested, that actually brings in what are known as tiny homes on wheels. So that those would now meet the definition of a manufactured home, meaning they would be allowed everywhere. So kind of interesting.
Okay. Anybody have any questions?
There's a lot there.
There's a lot.
Yeah, there is a lot there. I didn't put in any things related to taxation, et cetera, but of course, when it comes to municipal government as a whole, there's more, for sure.
Okay. Well, thank you, Jay. That's a good update, and well done. Okay. So is there any other questions? I guess we'll move on to the second item, our work session. Supplemental design guidelines for the Northern Commercial Mixed Use Village District. Area in the Northern Commercial District created at town meeting on March 11th, 2025. Also review section 1.20.2 off-street parking and loading. Set a hearing date for the above. So I'll turn it over to Jay.
All right, I'm just gonna start with the supplemental design guidelines. So I just passed out a copy of this. Nothing has changed since the last time we viewed this, except there are some more images that were added. I'm always looking for and thinking about more images. Still am, but nevertheless, I'll just kind of walk through the ones that were changed or inserted. And I'll note again, the only thing that changed from the last time, so the last time, we've changed nothing since our last meeting. We made one change that we talked about at the last meeting from the meeting before that. So not much else has changed. I did have one board member make some suggestions for images. At least one of those I was able to incorporate. So really the first new image that you see, other than the one on page 2, got much bigger. I think I'll shrink that a little. Was a suggestion that we include Corning Farm example under townhouses. You'll note the image before showed an example of attached units with driveways and green space, and we had a requirement in that in those circumstances you have to have at least 25% of the front yard had to be green space. And so the townhouses at Corning Farm are an example of that. And so I included that. The Hidden Pond Apartments example was in there, below that was in there previously. Going on to page 4, we talked about this last time, but I kept in the changes shown as changes to subsection 4. That was to the single row of parking, now noting that it's preferred rather than required. So not much change there. And the rest of the images on 4 and 5 you've seen before. Threw in another image on the top of page 6. This is an example. Of course, I happened to be on vacation at the cave, so I took this picture. So this is a 2-tenant retail building, so a small retail building. It is 2, it could be 3. It's just a small market and a kind of takeout lunch shop. But similar, I think, in scale to what we might see in one of our developments. In this case, this does have a double row of parking, so that was one of the things we talked about, although it's not all shown, just because if you try to shoot all the way across the double row, you're just going to see a little narrow strip. So I put it just in parentheses, partially shown. And then on the next page, a new image inserted. These are actually all detached units, and it's just an example of a traditional village style, fairly high density development, but detached units with some landscaping, sidewalks, and newly planted street trees. And then, that went on to 8 and 9. I'll shrink those images so that they go on one page. They were on one page. How did that happen? Nevertheless. And those were images that you saw before. So those are really the only changes, is we just stuck in a few more examples. And that's it. And on this, then we can go ahead and talk about parking. Parking I'll just bring up here. It did not change. Let's go with red line. So I did include both red line and non-red line just because there was so much red line. But the main thing, and again, we did talk about this last time, I'll just touch on again briefly the changes that we made between the prior meeting and the one before it. Those are the ones that are shown in light blue. So on page 1, that was adding gathering places. And essentially that came out of the long conversation we had about places of worship, etc., how to define them, and we just zoomed in on gathering spaces. And then moving on down to page 2, we had struck marina, because we did not think it would be likely to see a marina in Litchfield, and that was really it. The real, what we were really waiting on was the language around, multifamily requirements, parking requirements for multifamily, and to see what happened with the legislation. I think we talked about that earlier. We can't require more than 1 parking space. This is what this now says. Multifamily residential development shall provide not less than 1 parking space per individual dwelling unit. I think, again, as we had discussed, it's highly unlikely anyone in Litchfield is going to provide spaces, only 1 space per unit. But nevertheless, that is almost certainly what will be passing into law statewide, so we ought to reflect that, obviously, in our regulations. That is really it. Everything else I think we've talked about before, and it was really just trying to bring our parking requirements more in line with what we're seeing in peer communities, and trying to, wherever possible, link the parking space requirement for various commercial uses to something objective, either seating capacity or in most cases square footage, and eliminate references to things like number of employees on the largest shift, things that we could objectively measure. So that is it for both of these.
Okay. Thank you very much, Jay. Any questions from the board regarding the changes?
And just to add, if it's the will of the board, the next step would be to vote to send them to public hearing, if that's what we wish.
Yeah, so since this one has one language for 1 spot per unit, it's in compliance with the stuff we're seeing in the legislature.
Yes,
So then it's ready, basically.
yes.
Nice. And regarding the supplemental guidelines, we asked the members who were here last time that if they weren't here next time, if they would be comfortable for us to put it up for public hearing, and they said yes. So if they dislike any of the new images, then I guess they can bring that up at the public hearing if we decide to
Absolutely.
do that.
You can always change them.
But I'm sure it would be good to get these in so that the developers have more certainty in what we are requiring.
As far as the public hearing goes, I would request that you go to August 5th with that instead of the 15th of July, because it would have to be in the newspaper on the 3rd, and I'm not sure, 3rd of July. I'm not sure what the union leaders cutoff is. Plus, I would need a clean copy for tomorrow, actually, to put out in the viewing room, so it's a little tight.
I see you have here alternative parking solution.
Yes.
Was that something that was discussed last time? I don't remember seeing.
Yes, that came out of legislation that passed last year,
Okay.
and so far as I can tell, that survived. It's really not relevant to us. I suppose, well, I take that back. It could become relevant in a mixed-use development where someone proposes, I want to share parking with a commercial use and a residential use, and maybe they can demonstrate that one use offsets the other. So I don't want to say it would be irrelevant, it's highly unlikely. But that would be the only scenario I could see it would be a mixed-use development. But it's kind of, that's really one that makes, what that's really intended for, well, I shouldn't say really intended for, but where that's most applicable is in an urban area where there's public parking. And that's, you can say, I have reserved spots in the parking garage on Elm Street, therefore let me use those instead of providing on site.
Well, it is a workshop, and I see Mr. Moreau in the gallery this evening. I will open it up to public comment. Mr. Moreau, if you have anything to say this evening, or you're welcome to come forward.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, any other questions from the board? And I guess the question is, if the board is good with the changes that have been proposed, do we want to vote tonight to send both of these to public hearing? And I'll entertain a motion on both of them, if the board so will.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we take supplemental design guidelines for the mixed-use village development alternative, section 120.15, to public hearing on August 5th.
I'll second Russell's motion.
I have a motion and a second. Do I have any further discussion?
So that's for just the supplemental
The design.
guidelines, or is it for both?
No, it's just for supplemental guidelines.
For the supplemental.
The rest of it's a mouthful. That's the next motion. One motion at a time.
Yep, no, that's fine. Okay, so I have a motion, I have a second. Any further discussion? Anything else?
Nope.
All right, this is vote to go to public hearing. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, abstain. Motion passes. 6-0-0. Okay, that's on supplemental design guidelines for mixed use. So we've done that. Now, what about the off-street parking and loading? Do we want to entertain a motion? I can entertain a motion for that as well.
I would make a motion, Mr. Chairman, to take off-street parking and loading, section 120.2, to public hearing on August 5th.
I'll second that.
Okay, I have a motion by Russ, I have a second by Travis. Any further discussion on that motion? All right, take a vote. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, abstained. Motion passes 6-0-0. Okay, so those both will go to public hearing. Thank you. All right. So that. Just curious, Jay, was this, this document, did you want to discuss it, or is that something that we want to talk about, or?
Yeah, Joan had passed that out, but that is the language of the ADU.
Oh, from this?
Right, so we
Okay,
touched
all right,
on it,
got
but
it.
that's
Okay.
the full bill.
Perfect, all right, I just wanted to make sure. So, okay, so moving on.
Have a good night.
Thank you, have a good evening. Let's see. Well, I guess we set those for hearing. Committee reports, any reports from any committees? Jeremy, what about economic
Yes.
development, what's going on?
We met last week, the Economic Development Committee, and a great meeting. We're trying to ramp up our speed here and develop something for the Board of Selectmen in the next few months here. So I was tasked with talking to you guys about what we feel could be possible roadblocks, ways to streamline our procedures in town to help move development forward. So if you guys have any kind of feedback in that regard, that would be great. Most stuff we're talking about kind of lines up with our new development district here, so it's pretty well in line together. So if you guys think of anything, which this flow chart might help us all too, if you guys look at that, as we got passed out. If you guys want to review this and get back to me, if you see any kind of ways to make things faster, more thorough, whatever you want to say here, to help with us being able to promote development in town.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
It was mentioned at the Economic Development Committee by a member to talk to the state about AOT permits and dredge and fill permits. I personally do not see a problem with AOT permits. They are thorough, they get back to us timely, and they ask the applicant for more information if needed, and I don't see it going down that.
Yeah, people brought it up. It's not totally part of our charge with that committee, so we were gonna mostly stay out of that as far as it goes. So,
Governor did sign legislation, I think it was executive order, I think is the most appropriate term, mandating that state agencies review permit applications within 60 days. There was legislation that just extended DOT driveway permits for what are considered major traffic generators to 90. So that's, I think, where we've seen the biggest
Right.
hold up is driveway permits that have
Right.
taken a year. So that's a biggie.
right.
Yeah.
Stuff like that, it's good for us to know, and if we can try and find some action to help speed things along, but more just in-town items that we can hopefully speed up the process on. So,
Has the report been drafted, or? is
not
that
yet, we're,
Still working on that?
that's
Working
probably
on
gonna
this?
come out at the end of next month,
Okay,
with some kind of draft and stuff, and then what are the next steps? So it's moving along,
very good,
yeah.
thank you.
And our next meeting is the end of this month, so next meeting will be on July 30th at 6:30 right here in Town Hall.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yep.
Jay, NRPC, anything from NRPC?
Not too much yet. We had our annual meeting in June, so I think that went fairly well. Of course, transportation stuff, as always. We did have a presentation from the State Highway Safety Group. Trends are not good, I think was the main takeaway. And they're trying to figure out some strategies around what to do, especially for some of the more egregious issues that we're seeing, like people driving more than 100 miles an hour, crossing medians. So yeah, the trends are unfortunate, I think, almost across the board. The other one, another biggie, is we've seen an over 200% increase in fatalities of older drivers, 70 and older. So that's, again, why, I don't know. But that was quite interesting. And we will see what's happening with the 10-year plan, but the Governor's Advisory Group on Transportation, GASSET, who is charged, which is basically the governor and the executive council, who are charged initially with putting forward recommendations under the state's 10-year plan met last week. That was their first meeting. There will be public hearings in the fall. As we understand it, their next meeting will be August 13th, at which point we expect that DOT staff will provide their recommendations. What we're hearing is that the 10-year plan, just backing up a little for those who aren't familiar with the 10-year plan, the 10-year plan for transportation is updated every 2 years. Basically, we're always in the process of updating it. You can't spend any state or federal money on a transportation project in New Hampshire unless it's in the 10-year plan. And that includes the scope of the project has to be defined, the costs, the funding sources, the year, et cetera. And so basically that's always being added to, it's always in flux, and it's also required to be what is called fiscally constrained. There has to be available dollars from the various sources to fund the project. So as we understand it, the projects that are currently submitted exceed available funding by about $400 million. So we're looking at very significant cuts to projects. We may not see any of the projects we put forward added at all. There may be other projects that are eliminated or move forward. The priority seems to be, not surprisingly, but the priority seems to be on projects that maintain the system, as it currently is in a state of good repair. I'm sure there'll be other priorities, but yeah, it was rather stunning to see a significant reason for that is not because so many more projects have been added, but inflation and the cost of the projects that are already in the 10-year plan. We're seeing by the time if you look over the time period for when projects were initially proposed, when projects are proposed, there's always an inflation factor that's built in. But the inflation factor that was built in a project that was put in 6 or 7 years ago has changed dramatically. And that's really where those increases have come from. So, yeah.
Okay.
More to come.
Absolutely. Okay, well, thank you very much for the update from RPC. The Lower Merrimack Local River Advisory Committee meets tomorrow night in Nashua City Hall at 7 p.m. They had to cancel the last meeting for lack of attendance or quorum, but they are moving forward tomorrow night with a meeting. I think that meeting is going to, they're going to decide who's going to be the next chair. Fran Murphy stepped down, and they're looking for new leadership. So that should be an interesting meeting. Conservation Commission meeting has been moved to July 10th, is my understanding, at 6:30 here in Town Hall. And the Capital Improvement Committee is meeting in August, I think at the beginning of August, if I'm not mistaken. It might be August 6th, but I'm not sure if that's correct. Sounds, well,
CIP is showing up on the calendar August 4th.
I was close. I was off by 2 days, but I was right on August, beginning of August. So yeah, August 4th. Thank you, Russ, for clarifying that. So we have a meeting on August 4th, and I suspect that we will have submissions from the department heads and boards at that meeting, so to review. All right. I think that's it for committee reports. Let's see. Next. Agenda. Approval of the June 17th, 2025 minutes. Anybody have an opportunity to take a look at those? Have any questions, concerns? I was not at that meeting. I want to thank our illustrious vice chair for filling in for me that night. But if anybody has any questions about the minutes?
I have a lot of red lines.
You got a lot of red lines? Is that what you said? Okay.
So I guess if you just agree with this, and then I will maybe just, scan this to Matt. Page 3, the fourth paragraph, it starts as discussed in, I crossed off as discussed in Mr. Charbonneau's application. And it should, I think, say the primary proposed commercial use on the north parcel, lot 22, map 22, lot 99, is a daycare center. Just inserted on that description of which lot it was. And
So
crossed
what paragraph are we looking at? I'm sorry.
1, 2, 3, fourth paragraph on page 3.
1, 2, 3, 4.
So I think in this
Okay.
case, it's the reference to Charbonneau's application is that both of them will have a daycare, are proposed to have a daycare.
Right, but I always think when you're reading this 5 years from now, are you gonna know what the context is?
We could say the proposed development across from 3A from this development also has a daycare.
Or we could be more specific as
Could
Joan,
do
just had.
Yeah. We just have to make sure it's clear that there's a separate proposed development.
Right.
You put that description in parentheses, so that, it wasn't said, but that's what was meant.
What, so say it again,
Because
Dan?
you called out the parcel number,
Yeah,
so maybe just put that in parentheses.
Maybe the proposed development across the street at lot and parcel number also has a,
or you could say that at Albuquerque 3A.
Yeah,
Mhm.
Yeah.
that works.
Mhm.
That's more readily understandable too.
yeah.
Yeah.
Also, okay. Has a daycare.
And then in this case, this one also has a daycare.
Right. And then the, not the next paragraph, but the paragraph that starts the site's left-handed parcel. I just added lot 22-4, should be map 22 lot 4.
Sound good?
Anything else?
Yes,
Yep.
then down to, same page, starts Mr. Monroe presented the plan informally to the Conservation Commission. It reads, which did not raise significant concerns. I want that added, which Mr. Moreau stated did not raise significant concerns. I mean, that sounded like the Conservation Commission had no problem, it was just a basic plan.
Yeah.
So obviously Mr. Morales. Which on that same note, plans are not to come to the Conservation Commission, I told Reg this, until they go to the planning board. And then they go to the Conservation.
Okay. Anything else, Joe?
Well, that same paragraph, this undeveloped section, last sentence, this undeveloped section could serve as a natural buffer. I think it was at the planning board that we heard, yes it was, that there would be a wetland crossing on the roadway, which we did not hear that at the Conservation Commission. So, he did say there was one wetland crossing. Okay, then page 4, 1, 2, 3, fourth paragraph, last words, he has 45 miles an hour, it's 40 miles an hour.
Yeah, there was a time when Moreau said it was 45, and then he was corrected.
It was correct.
So it looks like the wrong one is in here.
Next, nothing next, the, 1, 2, 3, sixth paragraph, Mr. Moreau said that the design concept includes garage-level housing unit style similar to existing 55-plus housing. I just added, it's similar to Corning Farm, 50. That's not 55 plus.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense. So does,
I know,
Just saying that these are gonna be single level units,
maybe,
so just leave,
rather than the garage under, it's single level.
did he reference his own 55 plus or
no,
just?
he doesn't have 55 plus, so I don't know.
Yeah, I think he meant like what you kinda typically see in a
Single
55
level.
plus.
Okay.
Right, single level
Single
is
level.
what he really meant.
Cross that.
Wider footprint with the loft. That was kind of his
Yeah.
reasoning.
I don't think it should be garage level, it should be single level.
Single level.
Yeah.
Okay, then the next to the last paragraph is just a typo. Conservation has lane, it should be land
Okay.
in the second line of the next to the last paragraph. And okay. The, page 5, 1, 2, 3, fourth paragraph. I think just insert at Corning Farm, after the first sentence, at Corning Farm, he reported that the first phase of 8 units sold out in a week.
Yeah, that'd be
Yeah.
clear.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it.
Okay. Anybody have anything else? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes as amended, if the board so wishes.
So moved.
A motion by Russ. Do I have a second?
I will second Russell's motion.
Second by Jeremy. Any further discussion? All right, we'll take a vote. All those in favor of approval of the June 17th, 2025 meeting minutes, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Anybody abstained?
Aye.
Motion passes 402. Okay, thank you. Okay, moving on. To any other business. Joan, did you want to talk about this subdivision and site plan overflow, operational flow
This is
chart?
from the technical review committee, and they would like you to go over it, and if you have any comments, changes, questions, email would be the best way to submit those.
So this came from technical review. Was this approved by Board of Selectmen, or?
No, it's still.
It's just a
it's draft-
basic
it's draft
flow
form.
chart that they created for
Yeah, it's in the draft form,
subdivision and
then
site plan review. Okay,
We can publish it to the, public.
interesting. I think it looks pretty good.
It does help demystify the process.
Have a couple things.
Any, in terms of how the process, I know you mentioned, the thing about conservation, can't comment before the planning board. Was that part of this
No,
change, or?
that was an aside that
Okay,
developers shouldn't come to the conservation, probably till, I don't know if it's till the plan's accepted, or at least till it's come to the planning board, and then I guess they can go conceptually to the conservation commission.
okay.
That, no, that wasn't part of this.
It says here, detached ADU requires planning board, may require ZBA, must go to Paul, I assume is the building inspector?
No, Paul, that's, fire department.
Or fire department, for 911 review, what is that? Is that
Fire
for
department is-
fire
is who
department's
issues-
review?
Who issues the, street numbers.
Okay,
So detached ADU gets a separate number, where attached ADU would have the same number as this, as the house, but a detached has to have its own number.
I see. Anybody have any questions about the,
You can look it over.
take an opportunity to take a look at it?
I'm curious, on the second page, subdivision and site plan operational flow chart, starts with submit for building permit. Following down the left, foundation only, there's a bubble off to the left of that that says evaluate for LUCT if yes. What is LUCT? I'm not familiar with that acronym.
This is more than a building, evaluate
I don't know either.
It's one that's unfamiliar to me.
Let's request some clarification on that acronym.
yeah.
All right, very good. Well, thank you very much. That's very helpful.
And then after it's finalized, it will come to the back to the planning board, I believe.
Okay, all right. So if anybody has any comments or anything, just, let us know. Did you want to move on to the budget?
Well, just, they wanna know if you have any changes or input to
Yeah.
that, because it goes to the Board of Selectmen meeting August
August
11th.
11th, okay. So probably if, this is an opportunity to take a look at our planning board budget for fiscal year. If anybody has any questions or anything, we can, maybe give you the opportunity to take a look at it and can address it at the next meeting. That'll be, so then obviously, we'll have the meeting before the Board of Selectmen regarding the budget process, so.
So the next meeting is, an amendment to the gas station.
Yes.
We did receive, and I'll put on the portal, AOT wants more information on the road widening,
Okay,
so, quite extensive.
okay.
I have a couple other things.
Jay, did you have an opportunity, have you had an opportunity to take a look at any of those plans yet, or?
Yes, and of course. I'll
Obviously,
review
you'll be
them.
commenting on
Yes.
them, yeah.
The tanks are moved, the underground tanks are moved to a different location, this is a question that came up today. Does that go back to the state? They're
You mean
moving
from the
the,
AOT?
well, no, just for the, the state approval on the underground
I
tanks.
would think so.
But we'll let you guys discuss that, and
When they go
obviously,
in, they come in.
they'll come in, and that'll be our next site plan. Anything else, Joan? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to rush you.
Tanks, we had a request from Mel's attorney, Mel's Funway Park attorney, asking if they wanted to know if it would be an administrative approval, not come to the planning board for a minor change to have the Holly Jolly Journey park in the cornfield, like the, Spooky World does.
So I did talk to Jay about this today.
But
My recommendation was that it come in as a minor site plan amendment. That was my suggestion. So, I don't know if,
it did come up today in the technical review committee that parking is allowed at a Christmas tree farm in a field.
mhm,
So,
okay,
how would this be different? I don't know. There are
versus an
butters
event, yeah.
with with both sites. There are butters that would be impacted.
Mhm. Right, and I think that's probably the reason I wanted to do it as a minor amendment, given that circumstance, and given that we don't have anything right now that addresses the issue of parking for the Holly Jolly Jingle, is that the name, what they call it? We have it for Spooky World, but we don't have it, from my understanding, we don't have it for this event, so that was my thought process, that it would come in as a minor site
Minor.
amendment. Okay. All right, anything else from anybody?
Oh,
Okay.
They, I don't know who's going to do this, but they would like a written process on how impact fees are assessed. We got through that it gets on the plan,
Who are they?
technical review.
Oh, okay.
They want
All right.
what happens after they're assessed, then it goes to Matt and Donna. Actually, that needs some homework, because I don't know what happens after it's assessed, actually.
Okay.
I know we collect them, and you have to
Right.
have them paid by CO time, or you don't get your CO.
Okay.
I did just remind me though that I forgot to mention Senate Bill 188. I don't know how relevant it will be in Litchfield, but it does allow a property owner to hire independent third parties to review plans for compliance with state building code, and as an alternative to local cities act. So there is a process for approving these local providers, but you can hire essentially a private contractor familiar with building codes to review, to actually do the inspections, and to review your plans.
Does the applicant, who,
The applicant,
the applicant is?
And who's liable after that?
I couldn't find it.
That makes no sense at all, but okay.
All communities don't have building inspectors,
Yeah.
so that's, we certainly address those circumstances. Or more, maybe it does more broadly, you may have a circumstance where the town has a building inspector, but the scope of what's proposed is beyond their
Skill
area
set,
of
yeah.
expertise. We've certainly had communities where something's come in and just because of its size and its complexity, it's like, so I think that would probably be another example of where they could hire a third party. The building inspector would certify, yes, indeed, they're qualified and accept
Yeah.
their review. I don't think I have any, probably won't come up in Litchfield, but you never know.
Yeah.
Require a certificate of insurance or something.
I would imagine that the
Yeah,
independent
I'm
provider
sure- I'm
would
sure
carry
it-
under liability insurance.
Absolutely. Okay. All right. Anything else? If not, that's all I have for the agenda this evening. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right, Travis made a motion to adjourn. Does there have a second?
I'll second Travis's motion.
Okay, seconded by Jeremy. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed, abstained, motion passes 6-0. Thank you for joining us this evening. Have a great 4th of July, and we will see you on the 16th? 15th of July. Have a good night.
So this one, clean copy of Off Street Chronicle.
Yeah.